Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, continuing with the 420X, we're carrying on with build of this. Trying to get it done as quick as I can, but I've had a whole load of other projects up in air at the same time. But we are at part number 40, or part of the manual number 40. So this is going to be fitting the electrics, I believe, and the servo mount, and see how far we can get with this. At the minute in UK it's about 4 billion degrees, so it's way too hot for everybody and everybody's moaning about sun. But let's bring in for a close-up look and see how far we get with it. So for this build we are going to be using the FlySky FXS 260 iBus 2 servo. So because we're using iBus 2 servo, we're going to be running Noble Pro, and we're going to want one of the enhanced receivers. So this is the FGR4B. I'm going to use this one because you get an antenna straw with a Tamiya car or Tamiya, so why not use one with an antenna? So first thing we're going to do is make sure that this receiver is fully updated. So I'm going to press and hold the bind button. I'm going to power it from any of the ports. I'm going to keep it held down until the flashing pattern changes. So now it's flashing slowly. Then we're going to go on and make sure we're on new model memory. So I believe 17 it was on, which is a clear one on mine. Yep. So I'm going to reset the model. Channel definitions, make sure it's set to 4. Then I'm going to go into the RX menu, update receiver, FGR4B, update. So this will look for any FGR4B that's in the update mode, and it'll just go through and update it. So once it's updated, we can just go make sure channel definitions are on 4 because we've got 4 channel 1. Then we're going to go into as RX set. We're going to go to bind. We want to be on enhanced. Start channel steering. So then I'm just going to disconnect power, press and hold bind button, power it back up. Binding. Start bind. Binding successful. So once we've got this set up, we're going to want a servo, and for this one I'm going to plug it into channel 2. Sorry, channel 1, and that's going to be NPD, so Newport D. So we've got it running in non-iBus 2 mode at the moment. So I'm going to go into as protocols. We're going to go to Newport D, so NPD. I'm going to change this to iBus 2. Then you're going to want to power cycle the receiver. So now we've got a servo running as an iBus 2 steering servo, and we've got it centered. We can go into his iBus 2 setup. So we've got all his information for his endpoints and everything, dead zones, thermal protection, power, the boost settings of it. You can play around with all these afterwards, but basically just want to make sure that everything is centered. So we can see all data, all telemetry, temperature of it, voltage it's getting, the actual angle. So you can see angle at top, and then you can see the speed, how fast it's getting to that position, and then your current. And then channel, we've got it set to steering because that's what we want as iBus 2 as on this port. So we can back out with all that. We can power off our receiver and disconnect to servo. And then we can power off our transmitter. And then we can move on to assembling all the steering components. So these are our stock steering components. We're going to need an MA2 screw. We're going to need the little olive. We're going to need a 2mm spacer. So this is 5.5 by 2 mil. Then you're going to need the correct screw for your actual servo. So for this one, we're going to be using the 25 tooth servo head, because that's what these servos take. And you're going to want to match one of these screws. So I believe they're all 10 mil, they're just different threads, so you want the correct one for whatever servo you're running. Now there's a few bits I'm going to swap out on this. So the plastic part, so the MA11, I'm going to swap this for an aluminium one. Now these are dirt cheap from AliExpress. You can get these. Weird thing is they don't work great with the springs that come with them, but they match up perfect with the springs that come with Tamiya. So then we're going to swap out the Q1 or Q3 part for the metal plate that comes with this, and we're going to swap out this big plate for top, which is the Q4 part, with the little aluminium part that comes with that. Now hopefully, I've not tried this yet, so hopefully this will all go together. So the Tamiya springs do fit really well on this and lock into place, and these are always a bit awkward to get on because you're stretching one spring over the other, and I believe the Tamiya ones, the first two springs are both exactly the same size. So we can get the first two on, and we should be able to get the third one on. Now on the Tamiya, it holds them a lot further open, but it's not necessary on these. So then we should be able to get the top part in place. Then we can get that in. Then you can drop the screw through and make sure the thread's not going to stick through too far. Then you want to put one of these screws through from the back. Now these are actually threaded, so you could take a different approach with it, but it will still work the way Tamiya intended. So we can get that screwed through, and that's the MA2. Then you want your 2 mil spacer. Then we should be able to screw this down on top. And when we come to putting the RC together, we can see if we actually need that spacer in or not. But it's telling us to place all this together on the servo. And you need to get it as central as possible. So let's just drop the screw back out. But it does show you that you can have plus minus 5 degrees, but leaning in to the servo, which is a sort of a weird thing that it shows you, but that's what it tells you to do. So we can get that into position. And the iBus 2 servos, you can change the dead zone and you can change the center position, and you can do all that off the actual transmitter, but then it will stay on the servo itself. So once we got that screwed in, that's pretty much this part done. So if I just loosely assemble this and hold it up to it, you can see that the side where it would be fastened pretty much sits exactly where the original Tamiya one would, and the distance to the center of the arm is almost identical, so it shouldn't cause us any problems, but we shall see. So let's move on to the next part. So first thing we're going to need to assemble, which is a bit weirdly shown in instructions because it shows this as a 3mm spacer, but it's actually the blue anodized countersunk part. Then it says we're going to need, so that's the ME4 ME4 screw, an ME12 countersunk shim. Then it says we're going to need the MB5 little silver shim, then a 2mm spacer, then a 3mm spacer, and then we're screwing all this into the side of the servo mount. So it looks like that's how it should look when we've finished it. Then we're going to need to attach a servo. So hopefully we don't need to shim this back like I did on the TA08, but we've got these really nice anodized parts that should screw in, but it does advise, if the fit is tight on the last one, to use a screw and a washer instead, but hopefully we're going to get away with this. So if I just gently sort of snug those up and then get the last one in this side. So it should just be able to tighten these down. That should be a servo assembly all put together. Then we're going to have to line this up, and you're going to want to flip the RC over, and then we should have 3 of the tiny countersunk screws. I believe these are the MA6. So we should get all 3 of these into position. And again with these, before I tighten them down, I just aim to get all 3 started. I just find it easier to get them to screw in if you start them off first. And then once we've got them in, we can just nip them down. Then we should have our K2 part, and I believe that is going to drop through there. Then we got to try and screw it in, and I don't really like doing this, but I'm going to have to grab this with pliers because it's trying to destroy my finger ends. So that is part 41 fitted. So now we will be moving on to part 42, and this should be fitting the motor. We've got the little arm to just pop on, and looking at that angle, that doesn't actually look bad. So at full lock it's not too far back, and at central position it's not that far forward that it should try and pop off. So that should work pretty well. So let's get us motor and see how this goes. So for this part we're going to need a motor. So we've got the Surpass Rocket V6 17.5 turn lightweight motor. Done a video on these. I like them because they got the bungs attached and 2 different sensor ports. So we're going to need 2 MA3 screws. So let's see if these line up with a Surpass motor. So I think we're going to need that one. Let's see which other hole lines up. So it looks like the screws fit fine, the motor lines up fine. Then we're going to need the pinion, and purely just to try it out I'm going to run the pinion that it comes with. I've got a whole bunch of different pinions and we should be able to get different spur gears, so shouldn't be an issue if we need to up the gearing. Right, so we're going to use the stock pinion, so I'm going to slide it into place and just nip it up. Then we're going to need to back the screws off so we can set our clearance for his gears. And I don't like to run these too tight. I like to be able to feel just the slightest bit of play. And if you spin it, just to make sure you don't have any tight spots. And then I like to go back and just make sure the pinion gear is perfectly in line with spur. And there we go, one motor fitted. Does feel like there's going to be a lot of braking on that motor. So once you've got them lined up and you're happy with your meshing, got just a slight bit of play, we can move on to the next part. Right, so first thing we're going to need to do is build this little thing up. So this is the ME26. So we're going to need the long screw, so the MA1, then one of the MA26 bearings, then we're going to need one of the tiny 0.1mm shims, then another bearing, then another of the 0.1mm shims, then you're going to put that through the adjuster, then we're going to want a locking nut on the back of it, and this will need to be adjusted once everything's assembled. So once we've got that built up and the little locking nut on the back, you're then going to hold it in position with one of the shorter 3x5mm ME1 screws, and that's going to go through the second hole in the actual carbon plate. And it should tighten up to run perfectly straight with the belt. So once we got that into position, we then need to get the actual top plate into position on the RC itself. So I think that's got to come under there and then back over top. And then underneath the front belt, so it sits just below belt with the tensioner on the top. Now the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this using the ME23 part. So this gives you less chassis flex. And the alternative way of building this is with the washer with the skirt on it, bearing, sorry, with the skirt on it. But I'm going to try less flex to start with. So I'll get that into position. Then we're going to need 4 of these screws in the front. And I will tighten these down when I've got all of them in position. So we need them 4 in first. Then you've got one that pops in the center and goes down to the motor mount. And then we're going to have 4 in the rear bulkhead. or front bulkhead, depending on which way round you put it on first. So once we've got these all in, you want 4 in the rear bulkhead, 1 holding the flex adjuster, 1 in the motor mount, 4 in the front. We can get all these tightened down, so I'll just nip all them up. So moving on, the next part we have is to fit the receiver, speed controller and as cap pack. So I'm going to fit this pretty close to the motor. So I think first off, I have to get a sticky pad on the back of our speed controller. So if we get this stuck in first, then we should be able to get our cap pack stuck down. And more than likely I'll be swapping these out for the non-polarity sensitive cap packs. But once you've got that, then we just need to get our receiver stuck down. So that's all our electronics in place. Should be nice and convenient now to get the ESC plugged in. So I believe that's going to live in there, and that one will live in there. We've got us wires relatively tidy. I'm not entirely sure why the carbon plate's shaking all over for the radio tray. Might have to look at sticking that down, because I don't want it doing that all the way around track. But we should just be able to put our antenna wire on now. So I've just had a quick look at the radio tray, and I've just used some of the Tamiya tape to stick it down. I don't see point in being able to quick release it, because you take the 2 screws out of here and then you can't get the radio tray out because the belt's in way the servo and the motor mount. So I've just stuck that down permanently. Back to the antenna straw. Let's have a look how long we're going to need this. So I can cut this down once I get the body shell that we're going to be running, but for the time being, I'm just going to stick it on. So that's got the antenna straw in. We've got a servo and as ESC. Then we're going to need as battery wires. So they're going to be our battery wires, and then we just need to get these wires soldered down nice on the actual on the ESC to motor. It should keep them relatively short. What I like to do, whether it actually makes a difference or not, but I like to try and keep them very similar length and just bring them all round. So we should be able to get them on like that, which should keep them really tidy and really short. And then I just extend the A1, just push it back a little bit. Not really sure if it makes any difference on the length of them, but I like to keep them so they look pretty tidy. And then we've got something to fasten these wires to. But I'll get them soldered on and then see what we have next. So there we have it. The wires all soldered to motor. I've left enough in case we need to slide the motor either way or turn it slightly. But that's got more or less everything in place. I'm not sure which way around I'm going to have the battery yet, so I'm not going to cut the positive and negative battery wires. And normally I'd advise shortening the servo wire and the ESC wire, but I do a lot of swapping and changing for reviews, so I like to leave them and just tidy them up best I can. But it does look quite tidy. So let's crack on. We've got a sensor cable to fit. So I'm going to see if I've got a really short sensor cable for it. And then we've got a few bits left. I think bumper and body mount should be about it, but let's crack on and see what we've got next. So I'll just show you quickly. Sensor cable wise, I've got this quite short and quite nice braided one. Get a bit of protection with it being on that side here, and it does fasten in really nice and neat. So I've just cable tied that down, just tied it wiring up a little bit. So let's continue on and see what we've got next. So moving on, we've got to attach the B4 part. So this is going to need fixing in, and I believe these are the ME5 screws. So we're going to drop 3 of these into the bottom, and I think only the center one will actually screw in. Yeah, so the center one you can actually get threaded in. So the 2 outer ones, these are going to fix into the B5 parts, and the round on top, and you've got a little hexagon on bottom, so they will just fit in. So we should be able to just pop them into the B4 part, and then if you hold them in place you can get your screw in. So I'll just get that one started. So we're just dropping these in. And then we just need to tighten all 3 of these screws down. So I'll get that done quickly, and then we can move on to the next part. So we're now going to need to fit the foam bumper, and for this you're going to need the 2 MA2 screws, the foam bumper itself and the carbon part. So these 2 bits, you've got to align the bumper on it, which is a bit weird because they basically not circles, and these are circles. Not sure why they didn't cut them the same, but hey ho. So if we line this up, and the screws should go in the frontmost holes. So we need to get them into position, and then we screw these down into the 2 B5 parts. And don't go crazy tight with these because they are just fine thread into pretty soft plastic. So let's see what else we've got. So we're now going to be fitting on the front body posts, and it looks like you do these so the arrow faces back, so the smooth part is at the front. This could be fun, getting them through here and then getting them to line up. It looks like that one's locked in. And it looks like that one has. And then we're going to flip it over. And then for this, you want 2 of the ME5s. And then we just need to get these screwed into the bottom of the body posts. So it should lock all his bumper in place. So that's got our front body posts where they need to be. Next thing, we will be fastening on the wheels, but I'm not sure what wheels I'm going to be running on this. So for this, I'm just going to be dropping the wheel nuts on because I'm not sure entirely what wheel and tyre setup we're going to be running on this. And I'm not sure why that were loose. Obviously forgot to tighten it down. That feels a lot better. Right, let's carry on. So for this part, we should be putting wheels on, but again, not sure which wheels and tyres I'm going to be running, so I'm just going to drop the wheel nuts on. Then we're going to put the rear body mounts on, and for these you're going to want the MA2 screws, and it does say put the larger part towards the RC, but I suppose it depends what shell you're putting on, because depending where your shell lines up, you could always flip these to other side, and you can flip them round for the longer and shorter part to push it closer or nearer to the actual shock mounts. But I must admit, this has been an incredibly enjoyable build. And I must apologise for how long it's took, but as you will have seen, I've had multiple videos popping up in between the actual build of doing this, because I have been busy doing some videos for Fly Sky, and we've had a few other parts that I needed to get a video done. Now the next part's going to be quite interesting for me, because I think I'm going to use the shorty packs that I've got, but I'm not entirely sure which set of mounts we're going to need for it, because you do get the, with the UK kit anyway, you get the shorter mounts for the low profile batteries, but I don't have any of them yet. So let's crack on and see which lipos are going to fit where on this RC. Right, so this is going to be interesting because it's going to be a bit of trial and error. So basically, first off, we're going to need to get a few of these in place. So it looks like we're using them to tighten up to the battery. So we're going to get one into that one, then one into this piece. Then we're going to need to get this long grub screw, if you like. It looks like that's going to screw down into there, and then the standoff screws on. Then we drop that through there, and then on the into the rearmost hole. But then on this side, so it says we can use this screw through the bottom, and then one of these stand off straight on it. So rather than screw it down, you can then try and position them. And see how these line up with your actual battery that you've got. So that's going to be an interesting fit, because I don't feel like that battery is going to want to go in and out once we get this screwed in. So let's try and screw this down. I'm just going to screw these in gently just to try it at the moment. And you do use one screw for the back one and two for the front. So let's just gently screw them in and see if we stand any chance whatsoever of getting batteries in there. So it certainly doesn't look like that one will fit. And it doesn't look like that one will fit either. So I think we're going to have to remove the standoff ones, if I can get a screwdriver down to it. Ball head drivers really do come in so useful. So if we just remove the two that I'm guessing are just there to tighten the gaps up, how are we going to be able to get these batteries in? Well, they're certainly not going to come out. So I can, at a push, get the Z batteries to fit. So yeah, should be able to get these to fit. I think definitely prefer to run some low profile ones, but at the minute I don't have any. But I think once we get a little bit of foam padding around them, they'll be fine. And the hard case lipos anyway, so it's only going to be for testing. I think that screw should be the really short one. Yeah, that fits better. So that is roughly where we're going with battery posts. Let's see what else it's got in store for us, because we should have the tops. So moving along, we've got the little battery sort of fasteners, and don't tell us to use any spacers or anything on these. So we're just fastening these down with some MA6 screws. Not entirely sold on this idea, because you're going to need a screwdriver every time you put them in, because they're just going to undo and fall off if you don't. So yeah, not massively sold on this setup. I mean, that is loose, and then you spin it around and it goes tight, but it's never going to tighten up exactly where you want it each time, so you're going to have your screwdriver and sort of tighten it up. Not the most convenient way of getting a battery on and off, but I have found with a little bit of adjustment on here, can get it so the batteries go in pretty good, and then I just need to make some kind of spacer or put a bit of foam on back of these just to hold them down, so they'll work quite well. It doesn't actually give you any guidance on what the hole's for on end of them and how you're meant to tie them down, but we do seem to be able to get the batteries in that a lot easier than I originally thought. So until I get some nice shorter sort of low profile batteries, I will be able to run with these. But if you see what I mean about these battery posts, they're a bit annoying. But looking at it, we could put a nut and bolt through them just to take some of that play out, or we could put a bit of foam under them. But there's plenty of options. It also comes with these shorter posts, so if I get some low profile batteries, be able to swap them out to these shorter posts. But let's see if we've got anything else, because we've got a whole strewn of parts left and it's not told us to fasten them on anywhere. But let's carry on. So we do have a really cool fan mount. Now this is designed to go in between the motor, and you've got a tiny little thread that you can fasten your fan to. Not really sure how it's meant to fit, because by the time you've got your ESC and everything, that's pretty much where the fan would go. But it does mount into that little hole in the bottom, and it does hold the fan sort of in that position, which would be over the tray. So I'm not really sure what they were thinking with this, whether it were an afterthought, but I think I might drop it in just so I know where it is in case I do need to put a fan on it. So it drops into that position there, and then you just put a grub screw in the bottom and that holds it into position. So at least I know where it is if I want to fit a fan, and I would just have to move the ESC back. This is one of the reasons why I tend to leave these a little bit, so I've got a bit of play. 17.5 turn motor though, don't think I'll need a fan on it. And there is other options for mounting fans. But let's see if I can find out what any of the other random little parts are for. So we do have this part, which is it B9 or B6. But basically that fits over the front, and it's a transponder holder. Although we don't tend to use the big type of transponders in UK, they're really small and just fasten down anyway. So let's keep digging and see if I find any other random parts. So we do have these two 5-gram ballast weights, and it looks like you just slide your suspension or steering arm to one side, and then they tend to locate. you've got a little pin to drop through, and then we can just screw these in. So I will fit them just for the time being. If I don't steer in the opposite way, should be able to get that one into position. But I'll be able to decide whether I actually need these or not as we get it on setup station. It'll give us more options to shift the weight around, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to see them, but they just fit down there in the bottom. That way. So let's have a dig about and see if I can find anything else. So you have a bunch of positions down the chassis, and with these you can put one of the MA3 screws and a nut through the top plate to give it less flex or move where the flex is. But we do tend to have a whole bunch of bits left. I'm not really sure what they're for. So just playing about with a few ideas of the bits that are left. But if you get one of the shorter domed head screws, one of the blue shims that are left, and one of the blue locking nuts that are left, and we can just screw them in, and the screw doesn't stick out the bottom. You've got nice rounded off edges. And for the 2 sets of batteries that I've got, at least, it does then make these carbon arms tie down and hold the battery. So a bit of an option for you to use some of the spare parts up if you've got same or similar size batteries to what I've got. And if you just nip them down, they do fit really well. It pretty much takes all play out of battery completely. So that'll work. Just need a little bit of foam to hold the battery snug, I think. But as I say, they're not the ideal batteries for it, these. So all I need to do now is decide which way round I'm going to have the battery terminals. Thinking that's probably going to be shorter than, yeah. I always like to go for the shortest route with the batteries. One thing I tend to try and do, it's nice to have one shorter for your positive or negative so you can't plug them in wrong way round, but the problem I've found is that, like these batteries, positive negative, not reversible. These batteries, positive negative, so you need to make sure your cables will fit for both your battery types. But I'll get some post connectors put on these, and we should be just about finished with build. So we've got his battery terminals fastened on, got his battery held in. So now we just need to power up our transmitter. Power on ESC. So it's going in the right direction, and the steering looks nice and quick. So yeah, that is about as far as I'm going to be able to get with the actual build of it. The only thing left to do is stick some wheels on it and tyres and a body shell. So I've got to pick out what body shell I'm using, what wheels and tyres. I'd like to get a slim, low profile battery, but we need to see what this thing actually weighs and what the balance of it is. But that pretty much wraps it up for the build. It is an extremely nice looking RC. And I know some people wouldn't agree and they would say that it's an older style touring car, which, yeah, technically it is, but I still think it is a really nice looking RC from Tamiya. It's definitely got a lot of potential. It's a really enjoyable build, and
to be honest, it just looks really bling. I'm really impressed with it. The fact that it comes with both the aluminium and carbon chassis. And I do like this version 6 rocket motor. The Hobbywing ESC fits really nice. You can get the just stock, but I don't like to tie myself down to just being able to use it in this one RC. I may swap it to a different RC. I may want to swap the motor and run it in a different class. So I like the newer Pricer XR10 Pro. But let's wrap this one up.
So there we have the Tamiya 420X. As far as the chassis goes now, that is completely built and finished. Just wheels and tyres and a body shell to put on it. It has been a really enjoyable build, and I really do like the way this is sort of put together. All the aluminum parts. It definitely looks totally different to what you'd class as a normal Tamiya build. But I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Sorry it took so long for this one, but I've got a lot of other projects on go at the same time, so it took as long as it took, but it's kind of done now. So can't wait to get this and running and see how it handles, see how it drives. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.